the thing that I'm focusing on here in this next piece of this talk is a few, one correction in the manuscript and a few notes in the margin that have to do with some aromatic substances. These are, as I said, perfumes, which the person who is sad will inhale, and this will help make him happy again, or her happy again. So the first, he mentions two substances, but the one that I'm talking about here is called it's ambergris. This is this thing that the whales spit out, and people gather on the beach, and it's used, I think, to this day in making perfumes. Very rare, a very expensive substance at that time, and something which was thought to have these sort of properties. And it's called in Arabic ambar, and the Hebrew word was simply taken over as inbar. But in the manuscript, as you can see here, which, as I said earlier, was translated from the Latin, not directly from the Arabic, the person has mixed up the order of letters. We all make these mistakes typing on a computer or whatever, and they do this copying manuscripts as well. But erasing and rewriting in manuscripts was not a very good option. And so what they would do, as you can see on the screen here, is simply to indicate the error by using dots. In other words, I would put 2 dots over the first letter and 1 dot over the second letter, indicating that the second letter should come first. So that's a way of telling the reader to switch the order of the letters in this manuscript. And this is a nice feature here. Another interesting thing to note, if you read Hebrew, that he's not saying inbar, he's saying imbar with a mem, with an M. And that is by the influence of the Latin translation. Because in Latin, the word is umbra with an M, then this man, I think, without thinking, simply made it umbar. And this is sort of thing that happens, I think, when you're moving from languages quickly, and these sort of slips come up. The second thing I want to point out in your next image is in a very interesting and odd and totally unique feature of this codex alone. The word for nourishing, as I said, these substances nourish the spirit in the way food nourishes the body. And in Arabic, he uses the word al-ghadhiya, which means to nourish, and it's a word that's used for food. The Hebrew translation also says hazana, from the Hebrew word hamazon, again meaning nourishing. But someone has written in the margins of the manuscript this Latin word reficolanti, which is actually the word that appears in the printed Latin version of this text. And reficolanti means to revive. So someone had caught their attention that the Hebrew word was not exactly the equivalent of the Latin from which it was made, if he knew it was translated from the Latin, or he somehow collated, compared the two versions, and noted that the Latin had a word that meant something different. But this word being somewhat odd, I think, and not known even to people who are students of Latin, led to someone else to write below the Latin note, as you can see here on your image, an explanation in Judeo-Arabic using 3 different words to tell us what this word refocolanti means. 3 different words, all of which have the same basic meaning of to reinvigorate. So we have here a very odd, circuitous route. The book was written in Arabic, translated into Latin. The Latin was translated into Hebrew. Someone had a problem with the Hebrew word and went back to the Latin version and wrote that word in the margin. And then someone else didn't understand what the Latin meant, so he wrote the meaning in Arabic. So we've gone from Arabic to Latin to Hebrew to Latin to Arabic. And someone will say, well, why didn't he just read the book in Arabic if that was the language that was most convenient for him? And the answer is, I think, that the book was simply not available. It was not always easy to get copies of books at that time, and we actually, it's fairly common sometimes when you see someone copying or translating a manuscript to say, I was working with a bad copy and I couldn't find a better one, or else someone else, sometimes people would say, I made a great effort to get good copies, but sometimes you just couldn't get a hold of one. And I think this book was really, as I said, this book was much more popular in Hebrew and in Latin than it was in the original Arabic. And particularly in the 15th century, for whatever reason, there was a surge of interest in this book. And so the Latin reading public and the Hebrew reading public were studying it closely, and even Hebrew writers were writing commentaries on it. But when you wanted to sort of check something, if you wanted to check the original and you were capable of reading Arabic, you just couldn't get hold of a copy. As a matter of fact, up until recently, it was very hard to get a copy of the one printing of the book, which was printed in Istanbul in the 1930s. It's now been reprinted in a different edition. So this is a very unique feature of this manuscript that fits perfectly well into this context of Sicily, of Jewish scholars who are conversant in the languages and are making a very close study of the text.